M420
Rapido's new M420.
that you're going to review for Model Railroad News.
Mm-hmm.
Well, give us a couple of first impressions of it, because I've tested it and looked at it. I've got my thoughts, but
Mm-hmm.
what did you think?
Well, I've seen a lot of Rapido stuff, and kind of gets into the groove of what you expect from Rapido quality. And then I took this out of the box, and there were some different things I noticed. I mean, first of all, have all the different lights you see, like the marker. I love the look of marker lights, so
Mm-hmm.
they were really cool. But then you get to the details. The sand lines are connected from the trucks up into the body. I've never seen that before. So when you're looking at it, even from a head-on view level, it looks like they go straight up. I've never seen that before. It's really cool how they did that.
Rapido's always known for kind of that underframe, underbody detail. And yeah, this locomotive striking with all the
Yeah.
stuff on it. It has a lot of important firsts. So here we go. This is the early stages. You get a little behind the scenes of how the reviews come together. As you see, I put together the prototype information for Drew, and then there's the captions, and he'll put in his review text or give it to me, and we'll put it in to the magazine. So this we have, I think we're lining this up maybe for July's issue. But the thing that impressed me on this prototype was, I know that the comfort or wide cabs came from, Canada, that now that's standard across North America.
Hmm.
And I remember as a kid that, oh yeah, Canada has those funny wide nose diesels. But this is the first, and I didn't know that. 1973, Montreal Locomotive Works and the first run of M420s are the first production comfort cabs. And I also didn't realize it is a CN innovation that they designed it. So Montreal Locomotive Works adopted the look, and then you've got what would be EMD of Canada, the General Motors diesel or GMDs, have like the same nose, which again is another kind of first, because you never think of, like a 70 Ace and a Gevo have similar noses, that they're wide cab or whatever, but it's distinctive between the two diesel builders. Whereas kind of coming at you, both the 420 and those early Jeep 38-2s that were delivered a couple months later in 73 have virtually the same cab, because the railroad dictated this is what we want, for safety and other concerns. The reason on that wide nose that I found in the book I used is Canadian National Railways Diesel Locomotives, Volume 2, The Road Switcher, from Steam's Final Decade to Privatization. And this is an excellent book. It was put out by the CN Historical Association in 2014. It's a hardbound book. And when I got it, and I'm not the biggest fan or follower of all the Canadian railroads, but I can't tell you how many times for a book that I remember reviewing and thinking, well, there it goes on my shelf. I'm sure I'll have a use for it. But I'm
Hmm.
always going back to this book, that there's so many neat things now. It's like more and more, how that is, you get into stuff that you hadn't thought of before. But
Yeah, absolutely.
that was our reference resource for our prototype stuff at the head end. And yeah, that's late 1960s that they started developing the cab. The walkways disappeared on the side, the nose went wide, and then the anti-climber pilot up front were all part of keeping things from going up over the front of the unit and towards the crew in the cab. And like the door, which kind of looks odd, the big thick slab that stands on the outside of the nose, like we'll wonder why that's not flush with the body. On purpose, it's made bigger and wider, and it's really thick, and there's no window. That way it can't be smashed and pushed into, or if anything happens, like you hit a truck or something and there's sand or whatever goes everywhere, if the truck was hauling that stuff, doesn't pour into the cab, that it then acts like almost a barrier, even though it still works as a door. So it's kind of interesting. At first I just thought, yeah, it's a wide cab and it's called a comfort cab, safety cab, etc. But when you read this review, you'll kind of pick up all the odds and ends of the what's and whys that they did certain things, and that they all have a purpose, which I don't think you always think of, do you? When you're looking at models and things, it's like, well, it's got a bell here or it's got this thing back here, but you don't immediately connect that to, well, it's there for a reason, not just because that seemed like a good place to put it. And so the whole nose thing is an interesting read that we've got. And it also introduces this striped paint scheme, the like zebra stripes for the CN. I didn't realize that, but CN was black with the white CN wet noodle on the long hood and the orange front end. And these units bring in the stripe scheme. So lots of firsts here for you.
Absolutely, and I'd say this is really comparable to jumping down the SDL 39 rabbit hole. At first, you start out, it's like, oh, that's a nice six-axle diesel, and then you jump into it, and it's like, oh, well, this is unique, and this is unique, and it's a whole different thing. And I'd say it's the same for this. I had no idea it was the first comfort cab, the first zebra scheme, and I mean, what better manufacturer to create it than Rapido?
Oh, I mean, it's what a neat project. And again, yeah, when it was announced, I remember you were talking about them way back, said, wow, I'm really excited. I'm like, yeah, it's neat. But now that I've done more research, it's like, oh, wow, this is like a very important locomotive, and there's a lot of firsts about it. And it really does make it something to add to your collection, or certainly if you're a CN operator, that you'd want to have that. But yeah, looking at these pictures, you can see some of that detail you were talking about on the sanding lines and the other things up under, like along the frame and sill. Just amazingly detailed. And the paint on this sample I thought was excellent. What did you think of the finish when you got to look at it?
Absolutely. I mean, I love the look of Canadian Pacific stuff, and I mean, all Rapido stuff's crisp, but especially this, it looks really nice. The one thing I really like about what Rapido did is this is heavier than any diesel that I've ever felt them make. I mean, usually Rapido diesels sit somewhere in the range of like four ounces of pull power, and I don't know what the test is on this, but just by feeling it, it's significantly heavier than any other Rapido locomotive that I have. So I'm excited to see that. But I mean, definitely a whole lot of firsts for Rapido.
And I'd forgotten that too, but there's the by the numbers is in
Hmm.
that bottom left corner. And yeah, for a little four axle unit, look at that, 18 and almost 18 and a half ounces. That, I mean, I
Yeah.
do, yeah, it was, as you pulled it out of the box, it was like,
Oh, it's
wow, there's
hefty.
something. Yeah, it's got a lot of heft. And you can see it's got good pulling power, and its
Hmm.
speed range was excellent. Uh,
Absolutely. Yeah, minimum speed on this. For some reason, Digitrax now likes to go by percentage, so you can't get 1 out of 128. You can get 1%. So I don't know what that's about, but what I could get the one speed step, I swear to God, I didn't think it was moving at first, and then I
it,
look up
and it's
close,
still
and I'm like,
smooth.
oh wow,
And was so smooth. Yeah, there's no,
yeah.
usually you get that really slow, you can kind of see a little bit of start and stopping, even if it is
Hmm.
pretty much continuous. But yeah, I agree. It was kind of that, let me stop and really look at this. And yeah, I had it at zero point 0.7
Hmm.
miles an hour.
And
Uh,
part of that slow speed performance is Rapido starting to move instead of five pole motors, the next generation coreless motors. And
uh,
that's what problems they had in their RS 11s and 18s was people, kind of hesitant to buy this one because of the coreless motor problems they had in those. But with this one, I think part of the reason we can accredit that performance to is to this new type of motor.
and yeah, I didn't realize that was in there. I'm sure you'll cover that part of it. As I say, I did the prototype side. And looking here, we talked about there's that first order in 73 for
Hmm.
30 units. They come back and they buy two more groups from Montreal Locomotive Works in 74, then 76 into 77. So they end up then with, I think, 80 units. But then Bombardier buys Montreal Locomotive Works about that time. And what they come up with is a modified version. And I put one of these in here so that readers can see in reference. You'll see the prototype shot there of 2580. At a glance, you say, oh, that's a M420. But
Yeah.
then look there along the back of the long hood and how much different the radiator section is versus our model shot and the prototype shot across on the other page. There were 10 of these built, these HR, it was for high reliability. 412 was the number, and those are delivered like around or before 1980 to make up the whole fleet of these units. And what, look at
Wow.
that consist. Can any other road put together this HR 412? There's an M636 second, and then a Draper Taper SD50F. That's a 1987 shot in London, Ontario. But wow, nobody else could lash up locomotives of those types.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that Rapido actually went through all the craziness to put together all those prototypically correct radiator, I'm sorry, radiator panel grills, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
if that if I use the right terms there. But Jason was saying that back in December, at least. I don't know if they've embarked on any more ambitious projects, but supposedly this was their most expensive diesel locomotive to tool to date,
Wow.
which is pretty impressive. And in the parts bag, it comes with, don't quote me on this, the 3-panel radiator grill on top. You get the option to switch it out for the later or earlier, again, don't quote me on it, 2-panel radiator, and just pull it out, set it back down. See that on the back
On the
there on the
back end?
top.
Yeah.
And then in the parts bag, it comes with class flags. So that'll all be
Oh, I
interesting
didn't even
to
see that.
see.
How cool is that? The little white
Yeah.
flags? I
Yeah, you
forget.
get two sets of white and one set of green.
Wow, I didn't even see those. Yeah, and
Yeah.
our picture right here has got the white flags for running extra. Is shown there in that prototype shot. That's September 73, so those would have been pretty new at the time, and that's from the first order being 2507. I thought it ran just amazingly. It was such a nice looking model. As you said, it had a lot of heft to it. I love the operator manual. I included it there in the review. Rapido, the way they write those manuals, I was saying to, I think it was Jordan there at Rapido, that they're so entertaining, because they make little
Absolutely.
jokes and other things that I think a lot of times you never really dig into the guide or the manual. But if you don't on Rapido, you're missing out, because this is part of the fun of having these is going through that. Now on that, on the operating side, I have I've got a Digitrax DCS 52 that I picked up recently that I was using for testing. And the reason I was talking to Jordan on it is, and I had notes, and I'm sure you got around all this, but I was trying to run it, and there was something I had to hit like around F13 or 15 to put it into an operating mode, and then something with the directional headlights. Like at first, I wasn't getting movement on it. And I think that's in the owner's manual, but they made some revisions. Can you kind of comment on what I half know and am trying to say?
Yeah, so they kind of reverted to OG Rapido on this one, where how originally, before they included all these different sound functions in the very beginning of the company, they made you manually turn on the front headlight and the rear headlight, and that's kind of what they did here. But what they have is toy train mode. So if I can find the locomotive here real quick, um, function 12 is switching mode. And so these three weren't included in the manual. So function 12 is switching mode. That's where both the front and rear headlight will be on dim. F13 is the rear headlight on off switch. And then F15 is what you're talking about, directional headlights. They call it model train mode. And so that's when turn it forward, the forward headlights on, backwards, the backwards headlights on.
But they're interesting features. But yeah, that's something we definitely want to also include in this review.
Yeah.
Is that because as I first put it on the tracks, it was like, what am I not doing here? That I can't figure out why I can't make this do what I think it ought to.
Well,
But
then there's one more lighting feature, and I was kind of talking to Bobby Allard about this. There's the what do you call them? The gauges inside of the cab are illuminated, 3 of them, and it looks really cool. But I couldn't figure out how to get it to turn on, and so eventually, through some confusion, I figured out that when you press F8 to turn on the sounds, the gauges turn on.
oh, cool. And yeah,
Cool.
I do remember seeing that, and I thought that was really impressive. That
Absolutely.
again, that the stuff they work into these is as great as they look. The little features like that, the light controls and other things
And the
are
ground
really,
lighting too.
oh yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
amazing stuff. This again was a very fun, very neat piece. I think the one you've got is DCC sound. And what's the sound system? Is it ESU?
ESU. It was supposed to be TCS, but then COVID hit and some stuff happened. So the PAs is their next release. Currently supposed to be on TCS.
Oh, okay.
Cool. And I took this to an operating session last night where I filmed 4 reviews. That took me 4 hours, and I went through all the footage, and it was like 15 minutes total of usable footage for all that. And I'm like, oh well, I guess that's the kind of effort you need to put in. But I switched
Awesome. Yeah,
this out when
I can't wait to see that.
yeah, man, I switched it out for EM1 on a Baltimore and Ohio layout. Switched out a consist of 40 cars from that locomotive onto this thing. That layout has some grades, and let me tell you, this thing just pulled it right through. No wheel slip at
By
all.
itself?
by itself. Yeah.
Wow, cool.
Yeah,
That
it
is
was
awesome.
amazing.
Very
I don't know
awesome.
who's prototypically going to do that, but for people like me who just want to run stuff as heavy as possible, it works out.
So, and I also saw now, these pictures we did here at the Model Railroad News office here at my place,
Hmm.
but you've got, did I see some test pictures you put up recently? You've got a light box and a new camera, and you're starting to do some photography as well as video.
Yeah, well, kind of photography to practice video. I'm not trying to move
Yeah.
too far into it, but in my not really posting much since March, I've really tried to hone in some skills and put out some better quality content, though it may not be as frequently. I'm trying to, make what I do put out a lot better.
Cool stuff. And you've got what, in addition to this, you're also working on another Rapido review, but something like totally out of left field. Tell us about that Rapido model.
Well, yeah, so in a future edition of Model Railroad News and in a future video on my channel, I'm going to include a review of the Rapido UK 16XX pannier tank. And so I understand if American modelers have no idea what I'm talking about, but just think of Duck from Thomas and Friends, and
Yes,
that's pretty
yeah.
much what it is. So,
That's funny. That's how I recognized it as a prototype. Was
yeah.
like, looks like a Thomas locomotive to me.
And so I have to admit, this was pretty much an impulse purchase for me because I was going to get the M420 and then I was subscribed to the Rapido UK newsletter. And then the day it said, oh, these are available, I switched it.
Yeah.
So it was amazing. And there's a company, so it doesn't come with DCC, it's just DC only or DCC ready. And Rapido and the company that they worked with to produce it, for Model Railroad Offers or something like that, none of them had any guidance on what to use for a DCC decoder. They just gave me the socket size. So I reached out to a couple independent people in the UK to try to figure out where to go. And I forget what it was called because it was 2 months ago now, and it's been working so well. This guy hooked me up. He runs a business. He programmed it to the exact. He bought the locomotive himself, got it all hooked up. All I had to do was take off the shell, which is really easy to do, plop it on, and I was good to go. So
Wow.
his name will have been on the bottom of the screen while I'm talking, and I hope to include him in my review. But it was a
Yeah.
really good experience with him.
What a fun thing. That there's been a few times I bought foreign prototypes and things just, and again, it's like you, it's an impulse. I'll see them like, that's kind of neat. And it's so
Yeah.
different, but it's still a train.
Hmm.
And suddenly it's like, yeah, I think I'd like to have one of those. And so it is kind of fun. I don't think it would ever overtake my interest in North American prototypes, but
Yeah.
whatever they be, there at times it'll, whether it's a Japanese bullet train or South American diesels, there'll be
Hmm.
something that I think, man, that is kind of cool. So
Yeah.
you're working on the 420. You got the locomotive review coming on the steam locomotive from Rapido, and then I think in this current May 2021, Model Railroad News is out now, and we've got that neat D&H and Erie Lackawanna Walther's Mainline PA review. So man, you've been cranking stuff out right and left.
Yeah, I thank you. Sorry I took a month off, I guess I'd say to you and everybody watching this, but you know, I'm in high school and stuff kind of gets in the way, so
I hear you.
luckily things are dying down. I'm trying to keep as organized as possible and, pull an all-nighter here and there, get stuff done. So that's what I'm doing right now.
Well, awesome, awesome. I look forward to seeing this. I've got this stuff sent off to you today to start working on that. And like I said, we're going to try to get this into July, and we'll look forward to that steam locomotive review. So it was great getting to
Absolutely.
visit with you and be on the show again. And I know we got a couple other topics we're going to work on here for like the next month or so. So, well, we got to keep looking at your YouTube channel for the Turntable podcast updates, right? And then do you post this stuff on Facebook a lot too? You do, don't you?
So about 5 days ago, I created a Drew at Nordale MRRC page on Facebook.
Okay.
So I don't probably didn't publicize that as much as I should have, but
I'll have to get linked to that. Yeah, I hadn't
yeah,
seen that. So yeah, that's how we can keep up with the new videos. Well,
absolutely.
fantastic. And then of course, modelrailroadnews.com. You can go to it and see news, reviews online, as well as find out more about the magazine. And the magazine also, of course, has a Facebook page. So
Cool, absolutely. And as I want to start doing, I've noticed 15% of the people that watch my channel are subscribed, 85% are not, which is a
yeah,
pretty staggering number. So you'll see my $15 subscribe and like animation to this side, because I don't know which side's going to be in the recording of the Zoom meeting. But if you could subscribe, I appreciate it. So,
But
but
you take that soft sell approach, right? And don't ask
oh
us
yeah,
to ding the bell.
I'm not going to force you to hit the notifications button because I don't do it myself.
There you
So
go.
there we go.